any of this?
It's pretty clear that the United States does not want to get into a fight with Iran. Uh, I I think those who are a bit older, I don't know how old you are, but those who are a bit older recall that when the United States took Afghanistan and occupied the country, and then took Iraq and destroyed that country too, they literally surrounded Iran. And then we had a senior American official say that real men go to Tehran. But that never happened. So during the 1990s, at the height of US power, when the Soviet Union had collapsed and the United States had defeated Saddam Hussein in Kuwait, uh, that period was a period when Iran was much weaker than today, and the United States was much stronger. Then, after 9/11 and after the occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan, Iran was literally surrounded. And Iran, relatively speaking, today was weaker, and the United States was stronger. But back then, the United States never dared to attack Iran because they knew it wasn't a war that they could win. It would have been devastating for Iran. It would have been devastating for the region, but it would have also been devastating for the United States. And that's why I think it's pretty clear that the United States does not want to attack Iran. I think that's the main calculation that Biden had, Obama had, Trump previously had. Uh, and if the United States could attack Iran and win, I have no doubt they would have done it. The same is true with the Israeli regime. The Israeli regime actually is much weaker than the United States, simply because it's much smaller. It's far away. If it wants to strike Iran, it will have to strike Iran over Iraqi territory. They don't have the capabilities that the United States has, and therefore their missiles would cause much less damage. And we saw the last time when they attacked Iran that Iran was able to down most of the missiles. In fact, if the Israeli regime could have attacked Iran again after it struck Iran, if it felt that Iran was weakened, it would have done so. If you recall, after the Israeli regime struck Iran, the Americans and the Israelis said that Iran's air defenses were wiped out and that Iran's missile building capabilities were destroyed. If that was really the case, then the Israeli regime would have done what it did after the fall of the Syrian army. They went and destroyed everything in Syria. And of course, Jolani helped destroy everything. He went and murdered the officers who were manning the anti-aircraft systems and the air defense systems and the missile defense systems. Why he did that? That's quite odd because those officers were never targeting the ISIS or Al Qaeda. They were always protecting Syrian airspace from the Israeli regime. But in any case, after the fall of the Syrian government, the Israelis went and destroyed all of Syria's military infrastructure and other infrastructure as well. Wave after wave of airstrikes were carried out. If the regime really felt that Iran did not have air defense capabilities or that Iran could not respond, it would have struck Iran again and again. But obviously, that's not what happened. So the Israeli regime, if it gets into a conflict with Iran, Iran definitely has the upper hand. Iran's missile capabilities, its drone capabilities, are enormous, and they could cause utter devastation in Palestine. The Israelis could cause damage to Iran, but they would definitely be on the losing end. Their only hope is for the United States to get involved. But as I said before, if the United States thought it could win in a war with Iran, it would have already done that. And today, Iran is much stronger, and Iran has prepared itself for a potential war with Iran, with a war with the United States. That's what these underground missile and drone cities and naval cities, as we've seen more recently, that's what they're all about. So that if the United States strikes, the Iranians will strike back. And since the Americans have bases across the Persian Gulf region and across West Asia, that basically means those regimes that have American bases, they will be complicit, and that will be the end of oil and gas in this region, and that would destroy the global economy, including the U.S. economy. True, the United States does not import oil and gas, but if gasoline goes up to $25 a gallon or $30 a gallon, I think that'll bring down the U.S. economy uh, in a way in which we've never seen before. Something far worse than 1929, especially when we take into account the fact that the United States, the U.S. economy is already in very bad shape, and the predictions are that the United States is going to face a lot of hardship in the future. So I don't think that the United States. I'm certain that the United States doesn't want a conflict with Iran. That doesn't mean it's impossible, because our region is in a very things in our region are very dangerous. Ultimately, there will be war. The way in which the Zionist regime behaves in Gaza and the West Bank and Syria, in Lebanon, against Egyptian interests, I think that will ultimately lead to war. And Netanyahu is sort of like Zelensky. Both of them need war. Netanyahu needs war to stay out of jail, but also to keep his uh, coalition intact, to stay out of jail. And Zelensky, I think, if he agrees to peace talks and there's a serious move towards peace, then he will have to accept elections, and he will lose those elections, and he will be removed from power too. So there's a certain similarity between. Well, there are many similarities actually between what's going on in Ukraine and what's going on in West Asia. But there is a possibility that there is a strong possibility that we will see war in the not so distant future. But I think ultimately, sooner or later, there will be war.
Donald Trump has frozen all aid to Ukraine, but he has not frozen any military aid to Israel. And as Israel has been sounding the alarm and screaming about how they need to hit Iran's nuclear facilities if Iran is going to be prevented from creating nuclear weapons, we also have a lot of anger by the Zionist regime about how Trump didn't say anything about Iran and barely anything about Israel. What is the play here for Iran with Operation True Promise 3? Commander of the IRGC, Ali Fazli, said that it's on schedule. How is Iran calculating when to do this operation and what its significance could and should be?
I don't know what goes on in Trump's mind. I don't think anyone really does. I'm not quite sure Trump knows what he's doing or what knows what he's going to be doing the next day. But I think that I didn't expect him to say anything in his speech last night, and the reason was because of what I explained earlier, that Trump knows that a war with Iran or an attack on Iran itself would have huge consequences, and it would be the end of his presidency. It would bring down the U.S. economy. Iran will not hold back, and the Iranian foreign minister, the head of the guards, all of them have explained that if there's a strike on Iran, the response will be devastating. It will be enormous. It will be beyond really anything we can comprehend, because if the if the price of oil goes through the roof, if the price of natural gas goes through the roof, uh, then that will cause factories to stop. That will cause supply chains to be completely disrupted. That will cause the whole global economy to suddenly collapse. And then imagine what happens afterwards. people moving, people will be on the move. The sheer number of refugees that we see today moving will be, I think, a trickle in comparison. I think at least the military in the United States, or at least part of the military in the United States, recognizes this. And I'm pretty sure that that's what they tell Trump, and that's probably what they told previous presidents as well. So I wasn't expecting him to say anything last night. Of course, there is a possibility, it's Trump, that in future he may start making foolish comments or start taking foolish acts. Nothing is impossible, but Iran has prepared itself for that day. And the United States cannot stop Iran's drones and missiles. It's just not possible. That will be the end of oil and gas trade in this region, and the whole of West Asia and the Caucasus. Uh, and when the United States cannot defeat Ansarullah in Yemen, then I think it's clear that Iran, which is infinitely more powerful, is not a country that can be defeated. So I think probably Trump didn't talk about Iran because Trump wants to focus on the United States. After all, the United States has been defeated in Ukraine. There's no doubt about it. I mean, some people say that Ukraine lost, and of course, and Europe lost, of course, big time, but that the United States won. I don't see it that way. I think that the Russians won, although they paid a heavy price, but the Americans lost. Compared to the Europeans, the Americans, yes, they did far better. Some European businesses moved to the United States. The United States disrupted European and Russian relations and created a greater dependency on the United States. That's true. But the United States has been hurt. The sanctions have hurt the United States when Afghanistan, the occupation of Afghanistan costed the United States, there are different numbers, but I think $2 trillion at least. And then Iraq and Afghanistan together, $8-9 trillion. Then imagine the war in Ukraine, which was far more intense, far more deadly. Imagine how much that has cost. It's not just the direct costs. It's not just the weapons. It's the logistics. It's the sanctions. It's the disruption. It's the refugees. When you put all these together, and the fact that there's been 3 years of war, and there probably will be a few months more of war too, then the damage that's been done to the West, the collective West, is enormous. So Trump has lost in Ukraine. The West has been devastated by the Gaza Holocaust simply because their image has been destroyed. They've been exposed as supporting racism and ethno-supremacism, and really being the most barbaric of all nations across the world, openly supporting these atrocities and openly supporting racism, and insisting on preserving racism and ethno-supremacism and ethnic cleansing. As we all know, those of us who are politically active, and I'm sure all of your viewers know this, what the Israeli regime is doing right now in the West Bank is huge. They are destroying huge parts of different cities and towns and villages. But you don't see this in the Western media because Western journalists or the Western media, Western politicians, those who are based in Palestine, Western diplomats, they support this. They support this racist regime, or they're too cowardly to say anything about it because they are worried about their job. So, but the rest of the world sees what's going on. So the United States has been hurt badly, very badly, by what's gone on in West Asia, what's gone on in Ukraine, and meanwhile the Chinese, with all their economic difficulties, they're not waging war on anyone. They don't have 700, 800, 850 military bases across the world. And whatever problems they have, they're focusing on dealing with those problems and moving ahead. And you've visited China multiple times, and so have I. There's just simply no comparison between infrastructure in different Chinese cities and Western cities. They are way ahead of the West. And as long as this war continues and the Chinese continue to move forward, the gap between the West and China will continue to grow. So Trump is not in a position to go after Iran, and but it's not impossible. With regards to True Promise 3, when the Iranians say it will happen, it will happen. There's no doubt about it. And it's like, as I used to say before, when Iran says it's not going to build a nuclear weapon, it's not going to build one. And the Iranians have never done that, even though Iran could have developed a nuclear weapon many years ago. Iran had the capability to develop a nuclear weapon a decade ago, more than a decade ago, more than a decade ago. Now Iran's nuclear program is far more extensive and developed. It's very simple for Iran, and there's nothing that the Israelis or the Americans can do about it. But the Iranians don't want to bomb, and that's why they haven't developed one. No one can stop them if they wanted to, but they don't believe in the bomb because a bomb would only create an environment in our region where other countries, many of them small and unstable, would want to have their own bombs. So Iran has capability, and I think that is deterrence enough. However, as the Iranians have said before, if there's an existential threat to Iran, then Iran's nuclear posture will change. But when Iran says it's not going to develop nuclear weapons, it won't, and we've seen that it hasn't. With regards to True Promise 3, Iran will carry it out. When the Iranians said they will do so, a number of things happened. We saw the fall of Syria, the Erdogan and Netanyahu and Biden together brought down the Syrian government and installed ISIS and Al-Qaeda elements there. And they, along with the Israelis, destroyed Syrian air defenses. Both of them. It's quite stunning that if you think about it. The Israelis bombed them, but the Al-Qaeda people, Jolani's people, went and slaughtered all the officers that were, or the officers that they could, that were manning the air defense systems, which were never directed towards them. It was directed towards protecting the country. But anyway, since Syria no longer had air defense capabilities, Iran had to reconfigure its defenses. They have their own calculations. And then after that, we had Trump elected, and then we had behind the scenes negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza. And they were serious. And the Iranians did not want to disrupt the ceasefire negotiations. So they held back. But the Iranians have said that it will happen. And they are looking for, as the head of the Iranian missile force has said, they will have one chance to hurt the Israeli regime very badly. And so they're going to do it when they feel is the best moment to do so. And it will be far more severe than True Promise 2. I know many are skeptical, and they can remain skeptical. If I didn't believe it would happen, I would stop talking about it. I would have just moved on and said, well, let's see what happens. But I have no doubt that it will.